The inflation figure that came for the month of July at 7.55%, well beyond the RBI's tolerance of 4 to 6%. All of that is going to have a long-term impact. We don't know whether RBI is going to take very kindly to this. Could there be a rate hike in future?
So, Shweta, yeah, I think, these numbers have come at a time immediately after the RBI decided on the third consecutive pause. Now, this was something that the markets were expecting, and hence we did not see too much selling or too much buying. We saw markets to not really react too favorably or unfavorably to the pause, the sustained pause that the RBI had made, the MPC had made. Now, the problem is inflation data came a little later, which is always the case, and inflation numbers come a month too late because RBI's action is preemptive, inflation data is reactive, post facto. So, inflation numbers have not have come out and are definitely not worthy of celebration at all. Now, of course, given the large, lofty ambitions that India has, not misplaced, but fairly ambitious plans that India has of growing at 7.6% to be the third largest economy by 2030, these numbers definitely come as a dampener. In the immediate term, what you're seeing is that headline inflation, of course, in the range of about 7.6% is well above RBI's threshold, RBI's tolerance even of 6%. RBI has come on record multiple times and said that we don't want to look at a range, we want to come down to the number of 4% clear. Right now at about 7.6%, we are far away from the target. Now, RBI had also said that it expects the inflation for the quarter of July to September to be range bound again in the 6.2% range or so. Now, these numbers coming in at 7.6% for July pretty much suggest that for the subsequent 2 months of August and September, the numbers will actually, the inflation numbers will actually have to come down to about 5%, 5.4, 5.5% or so. Now, where is this inflation stemming from? This inflation is largely stemming from food inflation, and food inflation has come in year on year for the month of July at 11.5%. And of this overall food inflation basket, you've seen vegetable prices, tomatoes for example, up about 200%, many other vegetables also up, but vegetable inflation has come in at 37%. This is obviously bad news for overall inflation numbers. It is bad news for the MPC's decision, which they may now be looking at in hindsight and saying that, hey, maybe, a 0.25% hike may have been in order. We don't know. US, for example, has come out and said that multiple rate hikes are going to continue. India is continuing on a pause with a hope that there could be a rate cut early next year, Jan onwards, right? And this is also election year, so I don't know how much independence RBI will be able to execute when it comes to the monetary tightening, to the monetary policy. But yeah, if inflation numbers continue, not at 37% for vegetables, even if it comes down to 20, 22%, food inflation comes down to 8, 9% for the month of August. The overall retail inflation levels for the quarter are very difficult to sort of, find their way in the threshold of the RBI. So, yeah, I mean, I think we'll have to look at de-link inflation from markets. Market sentiment is one thing, but look at inflation from the perspective of economic growth, from the perspective of the consumption story taking off. And these numbers definitely don't paint a very good picture.
And these numbers, looking at those numbers, ginger prices up 177%. The food inflation is a level where, if I may, it's not digestible at all. None of those ginger helps you digest. The price of ginger doesn't help you digest anything that you eat along with ginger. The only thing I can add to this is, Shweta, when the RBI has problems with inflation, it can introduce measures to contain it. But when it's something like food inflation, it's far outside the purview of what RBI can do with its policy to control it. Because food inflation is driven by supply-demand factors and sowing factors and monsoon factors. And all of them are negative for as far as the food inflation is concerned. You've had monsoons destroying certain crops. You've had certain crops like tomatoes which have not been sown enough for the season. So my biggest fear is that the government is not stepping in to bring down tomato prices. It's going to be a while before we see the original tomato prices of 40 rupees per kilo or 50 rupees per kilo. It's going to be a while because not enough tomatoes in the country and the RBI can't do anything about it. Not enough ginger in the country, not enough tur dal in the country. So, all of these factors are outside RBI's purview, and that's what is keeping me highly worried at this stage.
And again, food inflation is something, or food is something which is an essential, you know, I mean, by increasing rates, by crunching liquidity in the market, by sucking out money from consumers, you will actually not be able to tame the demand for essentials.
Absolutely.
And as Krishna said, supply happens to be a constraint. So what does the monetary policy really do to tame down this retail inflation? You know, so core inflation, yeah, RBI can do a lot, but non-core retail level headline inflation, I'm not sure much can be done by the RBI.
All right, let's quickly bring in Kush into this conversation. Kush, if you're still with us, how worried are you about these inflation figures? Core inflation, surprisingly so, still moderate. It's the headline inflation, food inflation particularly, that is giving pangs to not just people but perhaps also the government at this point.
While I agree, you know, with what was just discussed, that, you know, this is absolutely outside the RBI's purview, but I think, you know, we can take heart from the fact that food inflation is typically not so sticky. You know, in the past we've seen, you know, onion prices, you know, move up and then, you know, eventually move down. So my hope is that, you know, in the coming quarters, you know, if not months, we will see the inflation, you know, cool off, you know, primarily because of the you know, food prices, you know, rationalizing, if I may say. And then also, this being the election year, we know, you know, there could be a cut in the you know, crude oil prices also. So there is a very good possibility that you know, the inflation could probably head south, you know, in the coming days, giving some comfort to, you know, the RBI. But yeah, overall, I'm really at the moment not too concerned about you know, the overall you know, inflation figure that's not come, you know, as low as expected, or rather, you know, it's quite high compared, you know, compared to the street expectations.
All right, and my understanding, Kartik, is it's only going to get worse. This is data from July. August has not been too great either, especially for vegetable prices. Throughout the month of August, we have tracked prices. They've remained very high.
True.
So when the data comes out, and in fact, this is exactly what we've been fearing for a while, when the data comes out, it could be a further dampener.